Maybe we'll get into it another time, but this one is now after the election. This is 13 days ago. This is April 29th. So I wanna talk about this one real quick. It's short, so.
Trudeau virtue signaled to a degree that was virtually impossible as he impoverished Canada to no positive end whatsoever on the environmental front. And
that's not true. That's not true at all. That nothing about that was anything he just said was true. Peter Jordan is something else. Pete Jortz over here.
And all that's going to happen is that that's going to be much worse under Carney. So we already see that Carney's set at serious odds, for example, with Danielle Smith in Alberta. And that's a continuation of...
Actually, no. So, fun thing about Carney is, like I said earlier, he's been doing the things that conservatives want. Conservatives want the carbon tax gone. He got rid of the carbon tax. They want a pipeline. He signed onto an LNG pipeline that they've been working on, that they've been talking about. The Liberal Party signed a pipeline. There's they want housing and affordable housing. There's a house plan. So, no. He's not at odds with Danielle Smith from, an actual policy or political standpoint. He's at odds with Danielle Smith because Danielle Smith doesn't like the direction that she wants to consolidate and hold on to political power. At the behoovement of Albertans, because Albertans have been suffering under her care since she's been elected. Talk to me again about municipalities in Alberta going bankrupt because of her. And Danielle Smith is the one who's at odds with Canada. Right. Everyone else is on the board here. And Jordan Peterson is going to pretend like Danielle Smith fucking matters. She is not that important. Albertans are important. Danielle Smith is not.
Serious odds, for example, with Danielle Smith in Alberta. And that's a continuation of the scrap that Smith and the West has been having with Trudeau and the Liberals and the East as a whole. That's not going to rectify itself. It isn't even obvious to me that the country itself, which the Liberals for the last 10 years have regarded as an entity with no real central identity anyways, it isn't obvious to me at all.
That's not true. He's just making that up.
That the country's going to be able to survive another 4-year round of liberal, utopian, globalist, environmentalist, net zero catastrophe.
Remember, Jordan Peterson doesn't like to identify himself in politics and likes to be like, he's the centrist, right? When did he move out of the country? Last 2024, I want to say around November of 2024, I think.
It's to me at all that the country's going to be able to survive another 4-year round of liberal, utopian, globalist, environmentalist, net zero catastrophe.
Obtuse rubber goose. Brother, we've been doing great during all of these catastrophes. If you, again, like I said, every time there's these global issues that have happened, Canada has been in the lowest end of suffering and the highest end of bouncing back the fastest. So look at COVID, look at fucking the financial crisis that the Conservative Party tapped Carney for. You can see Canada succeeding and in some cases thriving in these scenarios. So I don't know what the fuck Jordan Peterson is talking about outside of him just being angry.
And so don't be thinking that Carney's a new guy. And don't be thinking that his stellar resume indicates that he's going to produce some kind of economic revival in Canada. Because all the evidence points to the fact that he's going to continue to...
Our economy was already growing. What do you mean? The economy is already global, Jordan. Why is he yelling? He's mad. He's angry.
Revival in Canada. Because all the evidence points to the fact that he's going to continue...
Why do you care? You gave up on Canada and left.
...pursue the net zero delusions that he's already established as the center of his entire edifice of thought.
You know, for somebody who's a psychologist, this is why he got in trouble, by the way. This is why he got in trouble in Canada and why he, had to run away because of the whole issue with his license and the board being like, stop. Stop doing what you're doing. He's fucking trying to psychoanalyze Carney, having never met him, never spoken to him, and trying to present like he fucking knows what he's talking about. Now you've got to explain why that stellar resume shouldn't be an indication that Carney will do a good job. Right?
He's already established as the center of his entire edifice of thought. And if you don't believe me, and maybe you don't want to or can't, or you doubt me, read value.
The assumed dishonesty.
Believe me, and maybe you don't want to or can't, or you doubt me, read Values yourself. And then you'll see, read the first 3 chapters and the last 3 chapters, because the middle of it's just boilerplate. It's only...
Telling people that they need, if they want to understand Carney, they need to and Jordan Peterson's opinions about Carney. You need to read Carney's book, but not all of the stuff that he just said is standard and makes sense, but just the beginning and the end, because that's how you understand somebody and a book, by only listening to the first and last thing they say. How could you, is there a way for Jordan Peterson to be more transparent in his idiocy and his bias?
Only there to make the book thick instead of pamphlet length. And so...
Yeah, whatever, lobster boy.
And so, an hour of reading and you'll figure out who Carney is. Now, if you believe that carbon dioxide output on the part of Canada constitutes an existential threat of the sort that requires us to become poverty-stricken over the next 40 years.
There is nothing that shows anything about Canada being poverty-stricken in the next 40... Oh, I know what they're talking about. Oh, I know what they're talking about. Oh, no. Okay, guys, I figured it out.
Look at this report. This is from the Government of Canada. It's got the logo of the government.
Future Lives Social Mobility in Question. Okay, hold on. Future Lives Mobility in Question. Date published 2025-01-07. So this would have been January 7th. Introduction. So social mobility lies at the heart of the Canadian project. Many people in Canada assume that, quote, following the rules and doing the right thing will lead to a better life. Anyone can get an education, work hard, buy property, and climb the social and economic ladder. This is an informal but powerful promise, okay? However, things are changing. Wealth inequality is rising, true. Children are already less upward mobile than their parents. Yes, I would agree with that. Policy Horizons has explored some of these changes in Future Lives 2022 and Basic Needs at Risk 2023. More recently, the disruptions on the Horizon 2024 report suggest that downward social mobility might become the norm in the future. The scenario below paints a picture of Canada in 2024 in which most Canadians find themselves stuck in the socioeconomic conditions of their birth and may face the very real possibility of downward social mobility. You remember when we covered Pierre Poilievre? And Poilievre said that he pulled up this thing and was reading it off and was like, they published this thing, and if Canada's doing this thing, then we're gonna be poverty stricken, and this is what the Liberals want to do, except it was published by the government. And it's a massive hypothetical that if we do these things, then these things will happen. Quote, the report paints a terrifying picture of a spiraling economy, depression, and cost inflation. Poilievre says after releasing his party's costed platform. Quote, what they are anticipating on the current trajectory is a total meltdown, a societal breakdown in Canada if we stay on the current track. The report is from Policy Horizons, billed as a foresight organization within the federal government, which examines trends and possible future scenarios to help Ottawa build programs and policies, quote, that are more robust and resilient in the face of disruptive changes on the horizon. The report entitled Future Lives Social Mobility in Question was released in January, but has recently been making the rounds online, framed as predicting a dystopia. Not only is the report far from that stark, its authors stress the document is not meant to be seen as predicting the future. The authors call the scenario, quote, neither the desired nor the preferred future, but one Policy Horizon suggested is possible. It like the whole thing is about, hey, these are pitfalls that we need to look out for, and we need to make sure that we make policy that makes sure these things don't happen. And they're presenting, Jordan Peterson's out here fucking having a fucking whole ass, he looks like he's gonna cry because he can't handle, like, hey, if these facts are facts, then we need to be concerned about X, Y, and Z. Brother is like crying looking at a roadmap, and the roadmap says, hey, this road is bumpy. Like, maybe we don't take that road. And he's fucking throwing a goddamn hissy fit about it. Jesus Christ.
Virtue signal about how the planet could be saved while doing absolutely nothing about actually addressing any true environmental problems.
You're saying he's addressing these things and causing poverty, and now you're turning around and saying he's not actually addressing these things. So then what's the poverty over if he didn't do anything? Like, what are you talking about?
Then Carney's your guy. And if you think that core Canadian values are the values of the radical utopian environmentalist left, then
what the fuck is the radical utopian environmentalist left? Is that just the Green Party? What the fuck? What do you mean 2040 is not 40 years from now?
then Carney's your guy. Now, he purports to be a free market believer, which takes him out of the left-wing camp. But the way he maneuvers around that problem is by saying, well, the free market doesn't address the really important problems, and it's the...
Or by saying the free market should have the information to invest in a feasible future. The free market makes fucking investments into future technologies. You just don't like that those future technologies are the wrong color. Like, that doesn't make any fucking sense.
Central planners, the highly educated technocratic central planners that have to pick up the slack. And so he says free market, but what he means is central planning, free market. And what he means by central planning is
Illuminati!
his vision. And what his vision is, that's the other thing about Carney. You know, I read his book Values, and
He just completely, like, just went on. What? Did you guys see that switch? He's fucking rambling, yelling and raving, and then stops and goes, that's the other thing. Are you okay? Is Carney in the room with you right now? Are the left environmentalists part of that plant you have in the background? Are they listening to you? Brother, look at this.
free market. And what he means by central planning...
He sits like, guys, you know that men aren't allowed to sit like this, right? Like, that makes you gay. He sits like a beta.
Planning is his vision, and what his vision is, that's the other thing about Carney. You know, I read his book Values, and one of the things I really hope for in a book is
Bro, his book doesn't matter. What are his political policies?
I learned something, and all I learned from reading Values was something about Carney. I didn't learn anything of any substantial import in consequence of reading the book.
It doesn't surprise me that Jordan Peterson is not able to learn anything from somebody who's smarter than him and who doesn't agree with him. Jordan Peterson doesn't listen to anybody who isn't stroking him off.
Book. And
yeah, this is all just character assassination. Then write a proper book review, Jordan.
And I learned that he didn't have a single original idea. There wasn't a single original idea in that entire book.
Then what's the problem? If it was all normative fucking ideas that already exist, how is he some kind of crazy extremist? Can you pick a lane?
Like the first 3 chapters and the last 3 chapters outline his ideas, but they're not his ideas. Diversity, inclusivity, equity.
All that is saying that, like, fucking no original idea exists. Okay, and...
That's not Carney's idea. Environmental social governance, new policies that are hypothetically going to govern the biggest financial institutions in the world, and every financial decision everybody makes with stakeholder capitalism and central top-down planning, none of that's his idea. Net zero, that's not his idea. And Carney had the opportunity in Values to put forward a platform of ideas because he couldn't...
Why would he put forward political fucking platform ideas when he wasn't a politician when he wrote the book?
Said, well, here's the problem with the fossil fuel economy, and it's leading us into this carbon dioxide catastrophe. And here's an absolute...
Bro, Jordan Peterson seems really emotional about this. He seems really upset, guys. Like, we shouldn't make fun of him. He's having a bit of an emotional breakdown.
Absolutely detailed industrial plan for how Canada could move itself forward, own its own technology, develop a new industrial base that was renewable. Here's the...
Was the book even about Canada? I just want to pull up a quick synopsis of the book. Here's the publishing. National bestseller, winner of the 2021 National Business Book Awards, shortlisted for the 2021 Donor Prize. A bold and urgent argument by the Prime Minister of Canada and former Bank of Governor on the radical foundational change that is required if we are to build an economy and society based not on market values but on human values. Yeah, no wonder this makes fucking Jordan Peterson mad. People, all lives matter, guys. And here's the synopsis. Our world is full of fault lines, growing inequality in income and opportunity, systemic racism, health and economic crisis from a global pandemic, mistrust of experts, the existential threat of climate change, deep threats to employment in a digital economy. With robotics on the rise, Mark Carney argues that these fundamental problems and others like them stem from a common crisis in values. Drawing on the turmoil of the past decade, he shows how, quote, market economies have evolved into market societies where price determines the value of everything. When we think about what we as individuals value most highly, we might list fairness, health, the protection of our rights, economic security from poverty, the preservation of natural diversity, resources, and beauty. The tragedy is these things that we hold dearest are too often the casualties of our 21st century world where they ought to be our bedrock. In this profoundly important book, Mark Carney offers a vision of a more humane society and a practical manifesto for getting there. How we reform our infrastructure to make things better and fairer is at the heart of every chapter, with outlines of wholly new ideas that can restructure society and enshrine our human values at the core of all that we build for our children and grandchildren. Brother! No wonder it makes Jordan Peterson so angry.
Detailed proposals, and here's the vision, here's the proof of concept. There's none of that in this book. Hand waving about how the magical new renewable economy, and he has the gall to talk about hydrogen, which is
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but renewable energy isn't magical, it's just science.
Like the most appalling proposition possible. No one takes the idea of a hydrogen economy seriously, certainly not in the next few decades. There's no ideas and values.
The next few decades. I would like to point out that a country doesn't operate within decades. A country operates within like 7 decades. We're talking about investing in things that are 50 years away, minimum. Long-term investments.
Except DEI, ESG, and net zero, and those aren't his ideas. And worse than that, they're like the worst ideas of the last 20 years, and they're already outdated. So let's talk about that for a minute. So,
bro, are you okay? He is not, he is like having a fucking like actual meltdown in this video. He's like cringe, like his body is like fucking, he's not okay. Holy shit.
it was true that Carney took a leadership role as the UN climate envoy, and it was true that he organized like 400 of the world's biggest financial institutions to pursue what's essentially a net zero agenda. And that happened, let's say.
And Feline is right. The next few decades, dude, governments have been kicking this can down the road since the 90s. Some, you might be able to argue, since the 60s and 70s. Now that there are finally steps taken, you want to kick the can down even further? Dude, grow up.
Say, roughly 5 years ago. Okay, so let's ask ourselves, what's happened in the interim? And the answer is, despite his success in doing so, all the big players...
Why can you not acknowledge success of somebody that you disagree with? Like, why do you have to put success in quotes? Why are you so fragile? Why are you so pathetic? Why are you so weak-minded that you can't even acknowledge that this thing is good and that thing is bad? I have more maturity than Jordan Peterson has, and I was about to make a fart joke about his face.
Bailed out. BlackRock, Vanguard. All of these big players have decided that pursuing the net zero agenda, DEI and ESG, that's not going to fly.
That's not true. Do you have a citation for that, Jordan? DEI, by the way, has nothing to do. You just threw that fucking out there. DEI is a different issue. That's just a dog whistle.
And so, even if you believe that Carney had been properly successful in organizing these...
What is he looking at when he's, like, looking like this and he's talking like he's fucking, like... Who are you talking to? Is there a demon on the wall? What the fuck? Does it look like Justin Trudeau? Justin Trudeau haunts these men's dreams and nightmares, haunts the corners of their minds, and I love that for Justin Trudeau. I hope that makes him happy. I aspire to be that.
That's not going to fly. And so, even if you believe that Carney had been properly successful in organizing these big financial institutions to hit the net zero targets, you're faced with the problem that they don't think so anymore, and that whole coalition is falling apart. So my
citation needed.
Interpretation of part of the reason that Carney's motivated to become prime minister is because his international career has collapsed in failure.
What? Carney's international career has collapsed in failure. Do we have a citation for that? Because he was praised in the UK and in Europe. Like, what do you mean? I feel like this is just desperation. This is desperate projection from somebody who has had a completely failed career as both an educator and as a fucking psychologist and a psychiatrist. He was booted out and his license is like nowhere to be seen. And so he had grifted down to America after he ran away from the consequences of his actions in Canada from the boards of the Board of Psychology.
And so now where is he? Well, you might as well go to Canada. It's kind of a ratty little backwoods country anyways. And you don't really want to bother with niceties like actually having a seat and meeting Canadians and being elected. You can just...
He has a seat, he met Canadians, and he was elected. So what are you talking about?
hop in because you have this stellar resume and you're the Bank of England former governor and you can tell people what's what. And you can tell Canadians that you're an outsider and that there's going to be some sort of economic revolution. And you can do that while lying about your actual goals, which are net zero, or failing.
He didn't lie about that. I think we all know that.
To explain how you made such a cataclysmic mistake, and you're going to do that.
What cataclysmic mistake? What are you talking about? Did you just talk to Polyev and Polyev was like, no, Brexit was fucking Carney's fault? Like, that makes any sense?
He was wrong when he caused the inflation crisis in Great Britain.
Huh? What, Carney? Carney caused the inflation crisis in fucking, in Great Britain? Carney did Brexit?
Because you are a complete bloody failure on the international front, and that's embarrassing, and it's going to become stark bloody obvious in the next 5 years.
Okay, so you have special, Jordan Peterson has special knowledge about Mark Carney on the international stage. So he's making this declarative statement and that everybody's going to know that he was right in the next 5 years, but he's not going to share with anybody what it is and tell anybody what it's about, and he didn't share it with the Conservative Party, and he's not sharing it with anyone before the election.
And so, and then I would say, as I already said, that if that wasn't the case, then Carney would let Canadians get to know who the hell he is, and he wouldn't have called a snap election that will unfold in virtually no time.
The Conservatives were demanding an election, and he went, okay, why are you mad?
And I might also say he would have agreed to come on this damn podcast as well, because I offer...
Oh, that's why you're mad. Because he wasn't going to waste his time talking to you. On the other hand, you're not even a fucking Canadian anymore. You gave that shit up. Why the fuck? You're going to pretend to be a patriot? Oh, he's so mad. He's coping and seething.
Offered him that opportunity because I could be sitting here talking to him, and his staff was reasonably polite in their insistence that they couldn't find the time. But I also
sorry, Jordan, I'm too busy fucking clipping my toenails.
also like to point out that I interviewed Polyev relatively recently, and that was
and it made Polyev look really bad because he said he hadn't changed any of his ideas for Canada since he was 17 years old.
Her political career to the time I was a teenager. You know, some people even dug up my old university essays, and I
see his political career even back when he was a teenager in high school. He's literally never done anything else.
been saying precisely the same thing the entire time. You know, when I was 20, I wrote...
I'm sorry, did you just tell me that you have thought and have been saying and have never changed a single idea in position you've ever held? So he basically announced and you announced and agreed with you wanted a fucking teenager running the country.
By any standard of evaluation, the most successful political interaction in terms of distribution and impact of...
What? I'm sorry, say that again?
...in the time, but I'd also like to point out that I interviewed Polyev relatively recently, and that was by any standard of evaluation, the most successful political interaction in terms of distribution and impact of any Canadian political move in the last 100 years.
All right, so that means we can thank Jordan Peterson for people getting to know fucking Polyev has the ideas of running the country of a teenager, and that's why he wasn't elected. So, good job, Jordan, thanks.
We got something like 50 million views. And so if Carney actually wanted to communicate to
He had
Canadians,
50 million views, and then my guy didn't get elected because I was so impactful in exposing how much a piece of shit my fucking guy was. On top of that, hey, 50 million views doesn't mean they're Canadians watching, dumbass. This is so funny.
even Canadians like me, well, he had the opportunity.
You're not a Canadian anymore. You ran away. You don't get to claim that now.
And I might say, well, if I was Carney, I wouldn't have come on my show, and that might be true because I'm not a fan, and I would have done my best to be like a reasonable interviewer, and I'm kind of an agreeable guy, so I probably would have.
You're kind of not. You're kind of just an asshole, and you just bring on people who already agree with you. You're an echo chamber. All you do is promote shitty, random, batshit ideas. Like Carney's already got to deal with Trump. Why would he bother dealing with you?
And I can see why he didn't want to do it, but he didn't do it.
Are you tired of being held back by one-size-fits-all healthcare? Or having your concerns dismissed or being denied?
This Canadian's out here like, yeah, like, you're the best Canadian getting information out there. Yeah, here's an ad for American health insurance. He's so mad.
You can also read between the lines if you're willing. You watch how he responds to press inquiries and who he talks to. Talking to CBC doesn't count, right? Or CTV.
Poilievre took only 30 questions in English from national media outlets in the campaign process during a 17-day period. 30 questions in 17 days. Do the division and do the math. That tells you where they're going. In contrast to that, Mark Carney answered more than 3 times as many questions in that same amount of time as Poilievre did.
Poilievre also only ever took 4 questions and didn't take any fucking follow-up. So do you want to talk about facts, Jordan, or do you just want to be a whiny bitch baby? Again, we're also dealing with Poilievre, who was also the only candidate who didn't have press with him while he was traveling.
There are media representatives that are on Carney's plane, I assume with Jagmeet Singh. Poilievre doesn't allow that. And the reasoning they gave at the time was, well, first of all, it's too expensive. And second of all, it gives the local media at some of these places more of a chance to ask questions. Well, there's 2 things wrong with that. First of all, if there was a media member, John Iverson, for instance, great columnist, or so many other great columnists that are covering these campaigns, if they're on the plane, it's their company that's paying for it. It's not Poilievre. It's not his team. All right. There are no free rides. And that's something that they didn't seem to want to include in that conversation. So the whole thing that it's too expensive, it's no expense to them. It never was, and it shouldn't be.
Because the Canadian legacy media is heavily government subsidized. And so he doesn't like talking to reporters.
Heavily government subsidized. Guys, did you know that our public media is publicly funded? As if that's a bad thing?
The Canadian legacy media is heavily government subsidized. And so he doesn't like talking to reporters anyways, but those he talks to are...
Bro, he talks to all of the reporters. We watched him.
Government-funded reporters. Well, he won't talk to me. And he won't...
You're not a journalist! You're not a Canadian reporter, dipshit! Did you go to the rally and try to ask him a question? No! Did you have a press pass? No! You don't get to pretend those are the same fucking thing. You're barely even an interviewer. You're fucking some guy who fucking sits on the internet and fucking pontificates and says a bunch of fucking random nonsense.
Down with me for 3 hours and hash this stuff out.
3 hours? You were demanding 3 hours? No wonder they responded to you with, sorry, we can't fit you in, we don't have the time. You wanted 3 hours. And that doesn't include, like, the time before and after. Brother, like, no shit.
And I would have done it politely, skeptically. I've done interviews with 500 people, and many of them had political views that I didn't agree with.
He is not good at being skeptical.
Them were, well, the Democrats, for example, Tulsi Gabbard and RFK, Dean Phillips, who had held...
I'm sorry, did you just list RFK as a Democrat? Huh? And Tulsi Gabbard as a Democrat? Huh?
Is that ideologically would have aligned with Carney at least at one point in their political careers. And so that opportunity was open to him.
What?
And he didn't take it. And so instead, I'm talking to you directly about who Mark Carney is. And try-
He's literally just jilted. He's literally just fucking mad because Carney didn't talk to him, so he made a fucking 11-minute video bitching. I'm telling you who he is because I definitely know who he is because his staff politely told me he didn't have 3 hours for me.
His staff was reasonably polite.
What?
His staff was reasonably polite. His staff was reasonably polite.
And this right-wing grift podcast.
His staff was reasonably polite.
Jordan Peterson's just a fucking man-child over here shitting his pants because a fucking leader of a country didn't have 3 hours during the campaign trail for him.
Trying to walk you through what I've concluded. You know, I've done as much studying as I could.
What he's concluded, having never spoken to the man.
Last couple of months, including reading his book twice and talking to formidable people in Canada about what they think and my connections in the UK, trying to get a handle on this guy and evaluating his policies in light of what I know about the UK and about Germany and about...
Then evaluate those things. What do you know about the UK and Germany, Jordan? You were in Russia.
The net zero catastrophe, and in light of what I know from talking extensively to people like Bjorn Lomborg and other people who are, Richard Lindbergh, for example, who are stellar scientific critics of...
Bro, I know people, therefore I figured this out. He's just trying to name drop people, like that fucking matters.
The entire net zero apocalypse game. So in conclusion, Canada has a new prime minister. Who is Mark J. Carney? Well, he's someone who on paper looks stellar. He's someone who, because of that pedigree and educational history, Canadians regard as a potential...
Aren't his parents teachers? He's trying the credibility by association, yeah.
Pedigree and educational history, Canadians regard as a potential contender with Trump. What do we conclude if we look more deeply into what those claims truly mean? Well, if we do an analysis...
This weird finger thing he's doing all the time.
...of Carney's career and his writings, what we find is that he believes that there is no more important existential issue facing mankind and Canadians than the apocalypse that's impending because of carbon dioxide overproduction.
So that's not entirely true if you read the synopsis of this book. He seems to think that the crisis is about values, and like the market economy becoming a market society. So unless this synopsis isn't accurate, and now I kind of want to get the book, this seems like it's a crisis of... Here, the tragedy is these things that we hold dearest are too often the casualties of our 21st century world where they ought to be our bedrock. Making our values worth more than... worth something as opposed to only valuing the dollar. So, I don't think I agree with his assessment. Again, he's read the book twice, allegedly, and that would mean something if I thought he could read. Or if I thought that Jordan Peterson was capable of shelving his agenda or compartmentalizing things. If Mark Carney was the one who was running for the Conservative Party, Jordan Peterson would be fucking, like, ass in the air, cheeks spread for him.
And as far as I can tell, all that he does stems from that initial presupposition. Now,
I'm sorry, Jordan, do all lives not matter? No? It's also not a presupposition in that way. It's a fact. Like, climate change is a fact. Like, it's a fact. Those are things that are happening, and there are things we can do about it. And making sure those things are equitable and profitable, if you want to move an economy, are important. You need to be able to do that.
All that he does stems from that initial presupposition. Now, if you accept that presupposition, well, then perhaps Carney's your man. If you think there are credible reasons for concluding that there are other important things that might be taken into consideration, like the fact that
having a priority doesn't mean that other things don't matter, dude. There's an economic advantage to investing in technology. Period. That was one of the things you were bitching about in this one. So why would investing in future technologies... Again, what are the Paris Accords? The Paris Accords are some of the biggest economically powerful countries moving away from fossil fuels, moving away from the oil industry. So there is an economic advantage to getting in early.
including that there are other important things that might be taken into consideration, like the fact that Canada's economy is collapsing.
Canada's economy is not collapsing. We have the highest growth in the G7. We have the lowest inflation rate in the G7. Canada's economy is not fucking collapsing. That's not a thing that's happening.
That the prognostications for its continued collapse, especially given the industrial policies that someone like Carney is likely to pursue,
You have no idea. Oh my god, I thought you said you fucking read his political policies. You should be able to see what he's likely to pursue.
Prognostications is that unraveling will continue and accelerate.
Nothing says that anywhere. You made that up. What?
And that the prognostications for its continued collapse, especially given the industrial policies that someone like Carney is
Oh, he's
likely
talking
to
about this
pursue,
thing again.
the prognostications is that unraveling will continue and accelerate.
That's not a concern. Okay, so Jordan Peterson lost his fucking mind, is screeching and yelling, and would probably do a January 6th if he could. But he wants to pretend he wants to suddenly pretend he's now he's a patriot now after running away from the country and not wanting to take responsibility for his licensing in Canada. Haha. He's just super duper fucking salty that Carney didn't talk to him, and he's super duper salty that his guy didn't win, and it's very, very funny. America really needs to stop picking through our garbage and then giving it money.